Only you can make all this world seem right.
Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We got a whole bunch of new Q to do, me and you. So let's read it through without any further ado. Keep in mind, I always read through this once. If you want to skip through to my analysis, just click on the timestamp below. If you got the guts. No, you're a patriot. You're going to stick it out. Here we go. 1695, 18 minutes after the hour of 10. We get this reference to an April 19th Q post, Federal Reserve ending. Q says structure Q. And then we get two links here. Q says 2+2 confirmations fast. We will never again be under their control. Q. Post 1696. Anonymous says, morning Q. Q says, happy days ahead, Patriot. Q. Post 1697, responding to an Anon who says, need clarification in order to prevent movement split. Is R real or fake? Q says, there is only Q. Q. That's 21 minutes after the hour of 10. Post 1698, 51 minutes after the hour of 12. We get taken back to this February post regarding JFK. And Q adds on to this. I, name here in brackets, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. And then we have an FBI link. Q says, remember, you owe it to your country, to yourself, to your children. We stand with you. The time is now. Q. Now, adding on to that, post 1699, 53 minutes after the hour of 12, Q adds on to all Americans, please pray. And then we have a code, Q+. Post 1700, 8 minutes after the hour of 1 p.m., we have an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence. Post 1701, 10 minutes after the hour of 1, adding on to that, Q takes us back to 1690. You are witnessing, watching the systematic destruction of the old guard. Power will return to the people. Q. Post 1702, 37 minutes after the hour of 3. EU blinked. Concessions made. Zero tariffs. US, EU. America first. This is what happens when the POTUS does not sell out. After such an enormous announcement, what questions were shouted at POTUS? Russia delay in meeting Putin, D.C. Eyes open. MSM does not represent the people. The days of our leaders lining their pockets at the expense of the American taxpayer are over. Recent example. Then we got a couple, looks like a Breitbart link here. Go Kansas. Q. Post 1703, 13 minutes after the hour of 6. We get this Twitter link. Rod Rosenstein in brackets. Q. Post 1704, 20 minutes after the hour of 6. That will be 6 p.m. An anonymous post. This from, would have been post 66 on the Patriots fight board. If Rod Rosenstein is dirty, Mueller must also be dirty. If Mueller is dirty, Rod Rosenstein must also be dirty. And Q confirms. Post 1705, 27 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. You'll soon know why. Q. Post 1706, 28 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. John McCain says, ooh, hey, that's enough. No name returning to headlines. Q. Post 1707, 38 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. Responding to an Anon who says no name in the redacted portion of FISA application. Q says, when did no name travel to the UK? Q. Post 1708. Adding on to that, Q says, what if the UK government worked hand in hand with the Hussein administration to sabotage the 2016 election? Data collection, voice, video, bugging, creation of fake intel dossier using X-Spy, co-sponsor insurance policy regarding POTUS election, PS being Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, No Name, Clapper, Brennan, Rice, Loretta Lynch, Hillary Rodham Clinton, I'm going to assume that's Bill Clinton, Hussein, plus 22. What if Intel masked penetrations to frame Russia? CrowdStrike, servers, Seth Rich, Julian Assange, Why does the UK government desperately want Julian Assange? Think source files. The more you know, Q. Post 1709, 35 minutes after the hour, 7 p.m. We have this. You can read the JPEG for yourself. Blank. Q was right. Now here comes the pain. Facebook death spiral. Stock plunges 24%. Q says something big is about to drop. Q. And post 1710. 58 minutes after the hour, 7 p.m. We have this. We have this link to, looks like a June 12th post where there is a little discussion about Rosenstein. And Q responds, full weight of the House versus ARM. Why are optics important? How does DC work? Why is Ryan still in office? Lame duck. Why is Ryan leaving office? Who controls Ryan? Autists engage? Q. Q says, relevant today. News unlocks. Ooh, you are gutsy. Let's begin. Post 1695. Q takes us back to this post at 1194 where an Anon asks about the Federal Reserve ending and Q answered structure. And then we get these two links here. If you watched my video from last night, we would have already covered this first link here talking about Trump taking control of the Federal Reserve. The second link is also another CNBC article. President Donald Trump has a right to call out the Federal Reserve if he feels the central bank is not acting in the best interest of the United States, strategist Mark Grant told CNBC on Monday. The Federal Reserve Bank does not represent the emerging markets or the European Union. It represents the United States of America, said Grant, the chief strategist at B. Riley FBR. If the government feels like the Fed is not working within the policies of the United States government, they have a right to stand up and say something, Grant added in a Squawk Box interview. You have the Fed moving in the opposite direction of the government. Grant said to question the policies of the Fed does not interfere with its decision. Okay, so you can kind of see what's happening here. We're talking about structure within the Federal Reserve. Q goes on to say 2 plus 2 confirmations. And if you remember from the article yesterday, we're talking about this Board of Governors. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve is required to have 7 members. It has 3. 2 of the current governors were put into their position by President Trump. 2 more have been nominated by the president and are waiting confirmation by the Senate. After these 2 are put on the Fed's board, the president will then nominate 2 more to follow them. In essence, it is possible that 6 of the 7 board members will be put in place by Trump. All right. So that sounds like our confirmations right there. Q says fast. We will never again be under their control. Well, this is interesting because we've long been under the control of the central bank. It was a big reason for our founding fathers coming over to the United States in the beginning with. And of course, Alexander Hamilton brought it back in. And we had presidents like Andrew Jackson, who ended the Second National Bank, which was also a Rothschild outfit. That was back in 1832. I believe the lights went out back in 1836. But Andrew Jackson had long battled them. And President Trump kind of hails Andrew Jackson as a hero of his. And of course, we know what happened to JFK when he tried to end the Fed as well. So this is not necessarily anything new, but it's looking very, very tangible. And all these different confirmations speak volumes as to the structure of the Federal Reserve. Now, look, I'm no economist. So I don't really want to give you any kind of predictions as far as to how this is going to work out. But essentially, I would assume most of you already know this. If you do not, a quick primer, it essentially means that we've got this private banking cabal that loans our money to the government at interest. And the government, their only means of paying back that interest is to print more money, which devalues the currency. So it's kind of this vicious cycle. And right now the Feds are tightening up because obviously they're not, a lot of their strings have been pulled as well too. And now that we're seeing tariffs go around from the EU, China, things like that, the Fed is tightening up. And President Trump doesn't agree with that, and he's taking action. He's taking immediate action, fast action. So we'll see how this goes, but I'm very excited about it. I'm a big fan of some sort of tangible back currency, whether it's gold, silver, precious metals of some sort. But going back to some sort of backed currency, and I think most people are fans of a gold-backed currency. Makes the most sense. At least your money is worth something. Like, it's not really even worth the paper it's printed on right now. So we shall see how this goes, because we know over history how it's worked out for people who have gone up against the Rothschilds. But it looks like we may be in a good position to really pull this off. And Trump is making some quick moves in appointing this board of governors here. And it remains to be seen how that all works out. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. I think a lot of you guys commented on my last video, said that you were all for it. A lot of you guys were flat out for just abolishing the Fed altogether. Could be that we just end up, kind of restructuring it, but definitely nationalizing the Fed at the very least seems to be a very positive thing for me here. And I would assume this also means too that Trump really wants to focus on American products. And that's why we're going to deal with, in the outward narrative, talking about trade tariffs and things like that, or as the far left would love to say, trade wars. But essentially, it's there's going to be tariffs levied. But I think the focus on, again, is American products, American-made products, American companies. And we'll see how this all plays out. Let's move on. Post 1696. And Anon says, "Morning, Q." Q says, "Happy days ahead, Patriot Q." Now, this is probably just a casual greeting, but I have to admit that when Q said the words "Happy Days," I couldn't help but remember the TV show. And I don't know if you guys remember the TV show Happy Days or not. It was a hugely popular family show back in the day. And there was this girl that was, she came later on in seasons later into the show. Her name was Heather O'Rourke. She was also famous for being the child in these Poltergeist movies. And I'm sure if you've seen the Poltergeist movies, you remember this girl. Well, she had a strange death back then. Heather was born in 1975 and died at the age of only 12 in 1988 from intestinal stenosis, a severe bowel obstruction that the girl evidently had from birth. Yeah, I think they originally thought it was the flu, and then it turned out to be like Crohn's disease or whatever. It was a really, really weird story. The parents ended up suing the hospital. This all happened in San Diego, and they settled out of court. It was a very strange story. Well, this particular article talks about a lot of pedophilia and things like that on the set place and everything like that. And then there's sort of this anonymous story. And if you don't mind, I'm not going to cover it because it's rather long, but it talks about a lot of these shows that feature these young teens and tweens and things like that. And this girl was a big star, and she was running with a lot of big directors. And some of these people seem to be kind of a creepy bunch. Now, this particular story, like I said, is an anonymous story, but it does kind of lead and lend to the fact that maybe something else might have happened to this particular girl, depending on, you decide. I'll let you read the story, and I'll leave the link here for you. But let me just read you these bullet points here. Heather was acting in the 80s, and she was not yet a tween. Had hit films and television appearances. This matches. Entertainment lawyer claims this girl was first molested at 5 or 6. Heather was discovered by Steven Spielberg and had her first acting role at the age of 5 in a show called Fantasy Island. The exact television show set that these events occurred on cannot be verified 100%, but the clues seem to lead to Rocky Road, as it was filmed in the same studio as Jeopardy, which is still running today, and Pee Wee Herman, who was alluded to for being busted masturbating in a theater. This matches, or at least makes sense. A medic needed to be called because something had been inserted into the girl, which ended up killing her. This could match, as Heather died of bowel problems. So you can see, and if you don't mind, I don't want to go way into it because it's really kind of creepy and it's a bit long. But that was what I thought of when I thought of Happy Days. And here's the picture of Steven Spielberg with Heather and Drew Barrymore. And a little bit more information down here about this. And again, this is an anonymous story, and that's why I don't really want to dig so much into it. But it's a very creepy story, and they're talking about producers on these TV shows and game shows. And this was back in the 80s, where he says it was peak child molesting time in Hollywood. So since that's kind of just supposition, I don't want to go way into that. However, but I do remember this, and this was Scott Baio, who was also on Happy Days. He ended up getting a spin-off called Joni Loves Chachi, and then ended up being a star of a show called Charles in Charge. And this is what that's in relation to. This article is from back in 2018, February of 2018, so not very long ago. Two former child actors accuse Happy Days star Scott Baio of sexual abuse. And the one was this Nicole Eggert, was 14 at the time, and Alexander Polinsky, who was 11. It was public knowledge that Baio had dated Eggert, who was 11 years his junior during the 1980s, but their relationship has been cast in a darker light after she filed a police report against him, alleging that he sexually abused her from the age of 14 and had sex with her when she was too young to consent. Polinsky was with her when she spoke to officers on Tuesday, confirming her story and adding that he had been bullied by Baio, who was in his late 20s during Charles in Charge. Okay, so this guy, Scott Baio, was a big deal back in the day. He was kind of a heartthrob, and he was really big on Happy Days, and that's why he got this spinoff. This girl, Joni, also, she was Erin Moran. She was also a big star on Happy Days, and that's why they gave him the spinoff. But the abuse evidently happened on this Charles in Charge set. And there's Eggert right there. So I'll let you read through this if you want. I'm not exactly sure if that might be what Q is referring to, if Q is indeed at all using a double meaning, or maybe Q is just saying Happy Days ahead. So there you go. Post 1697. And Anon says, need clarification. In order to prevent movement split, is R real or fake? Q says there is only Q. All right, so look, some of you are new to the QAnon movement, and that's great. Welcome. And many of you have been following this for a long time, maybe longer, likely longer than you've been following my own channel. And just want to rememberize you that back in the day, it all started in 4chan. Then it moved to 8chan. And if you remember those days, QAnon, that must be that Pizzagate thing. Oh, it's that Pizzagate thing. That QAnon stuff is fake, just like Pizzagate. Then it moved over to 8chan, and there were a few boards on 8chan. Great Awakening. Now we're on to Patriots Fight. We've had a few boards, few trip code changes. And there was a period there where so-and-so was Q. Flapjack Anon is Q. Knick-knack, paddywhack Anon now. He's coming out saying that he's Q. And we've seen a lot of this. Q goes down for a bit. Next thing you know, everyone's following back channel. I the Spy. Q goes down again, it's R and on. You see what I'm saying? Now, I don't want to shoot all these things down because some of them are compelling. I've seen the pictures. I get where this comes from. And after all the digging that we do and all the puzzle solving that we do, a perfect example is this Happy Days. I just went off on this diatribe about Happy Days, and maybe all he was saying was Happy Days. Maybe there really is something about Happy Days, but that's kind of where Q has us. And sometimes straightforward, keeping things simple is the easiest way to go. And that's all I'm saying. So if you really find that there's something compelling you to dig into something, go ahead and do it. But as for where I'm at with it, I'm really just trying to cover Q. And as you can see, I've got plenty of Q to do. I've got more Q than I know what to do with. And I'd love to deep dive on everything, and I just can't. And R&On's one of them. Okay? No outside comms. That's the way it's been.
Focus!
You heard the man. Focus. Let's move on. Next post, 1698. We're taken back to this from February. Rest in peace, Mr. President JFK. Through your wisdom and strength, since your tragic death, patriots have planned, installed, and by the grace of God, activated the beam of light. We will forever remember your sacrifice. May you look down from above and continue to guide us as we ring the bell of freedom and destroy those who wish to sacrifice our children, our way of life, and our world. We, the people. Prayer said every single day in the Oval Office. JFK Secret Societies. It was missing an E, and I think that was, of course, was a different subject at the time. Where we go one, we go all Q. And then Q adds on here, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. And then it takes us this link here, FBI.gov. And this is the oath that FBI agents take. Talks a little bit about the history, the meaning of the oath, And it's a very, very long article, some interesting stuff here. But I think the big takeaway here, at least that I see, is that Q is reminding us of the history of all of this. This all started back with the assassination of JFK. Since your tragic death, patriots have planned, installed, and by the grace of God, activated the beam of light. And we see all the time Q talking about dark to light. We will forever remember your sacrifice. May you look down from above and continue to guide us as we ring the bell of freedom. And of course, JFK was famous for having the bell on his boat that said, where we go one, we go all. And of course, JFK was really trying to get rid of secret societies, and that's why they got rid of him. And now Q looks like he's talking to active agents, letting them know that they need to remember that they owe it to our country, to themselves, to your children. We stand with you now. The time is now. This to me sounds like an active call to active agents, or for agents to activate on something. Q is reminding them that they are here to serve their country, to serve the Constitution. And that's the unique position that these agents are in. We're not trying to protect a queen. We're not trying to be loyal to a president, whether it be Trump or Obama or whoever is in the office. The way our country is set up is that these agents are loyal to the ideal, the Constitution. And that's a wonderful, wonderful premise to build a country around. Q is reminding them to remember that. They owe that to their country. To yourself, to your children, we stand with you now. The time is now. And I can't help but think the time is now is sort of an activation. And I get that feeling because in the next post here, 1699, Q adds on by saying, to all Americans, please pray. And then we get this code, Q+. Now, look, these are one of those things that we can probably bust our head over these codes, and we probably won't find out until later. Now, originally, there's a lot of people looking at this B8028, and that is a private charter plane, actually, from Dassault Falcon. And there it is right there, the B8028. It's from Beijing Airlines, but it looks to me to be just simply a private charter. So it could be that we have somebody on a private charter coming from Beijing Airlines from somewhere in China. I'm not exactly sure about some of these other codes. There's been a lot of speculation. We have an AF1 here. Could that be referring to Air Force One? We have a T9. Could that be referring to a Terminal 9? Now, I've been on a few sites, and there were some people that were speculating that this might be Turkish Airlines. I'm not so sure about that. I honestly don't think we're going to know. Now, I also think it could be very possible, like I said, Q was just saying in the previous post and is adding on to this post to connect them, that they're talking to agents here. So this could be an activation code. This could be sort of a password code for certain agents to be able to unlock information that could be on a server. It could be one of those codes. Hard to say. We've seen that sort of thing happen before as well too. And of course, this is signed Q+. All right, so lots of speculation. There's such thing as an M5 missile as well too. That is a British sub missile. So who knows? I think it's going to be a lot more speculation. I hate to speculate on these things because it's so easy to be wrong. If you've got any great ideas, let me know. There was some things, some people were passing around a link to a YouTube link that was talking in binary code. I would stay away from that. Those kinds of channels have been around for a while, and I would highly suggest you be very suspect when looking at those. But this, if you type this into YouTube, it takes you to a YouTube link that was uploaded after this post. So I would definitely not follow it, just to let you know. Yeah, but it remains to be seen. We will see. But either way, it sounds like it's going to be something very, very big, because Q+ is saying to all Americans, please pray. Post 1700. If you're an American citizen and you don't know what this is, you better take a civics class. But for our foreign friends, this is an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Well, our form of government has long been very destructive, hasn't it? And it is our right to alter or to abolish it. I'm not so sure abolish is what we're looking to do. I'm not so sure that we're looking to institute new government. We just want to get back to our Constitution, get back to our foundation and principles. And this government that we've had, these aren't light and transient causes that we're talking about. We're talking about human rights abuses. We're talking about debt slavery. And that causes us to suffer. And this is a really interesting part right here. Experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. It's not very convenient to overthrow your government, is it? It's not very convenient to take down the deep state. But this has been a long train of abuses and usurpations. And it is despotism at this point. And it's time to throw off such government and to provide new guards. And Q's referring directly to that in the next post, 1701, where he adds on, taking us back to July 24th, post 1690, you are witnessing, watching the systematic destruction of the old guard. Power will return to the people. We've seen this with originally the executive orders, and then it was all these CEOs that were resigning. And then it was all these sealed indictments. Next thing you know, FBI is getting cleaned. The DOJ is getting cleaned out. And now we're seeing more and more of these FISA abuses come to light, which is really just what sets the ball rolling. But essentially what we really want to see is the server. That's going to be the systematic destruction. And Q has said there's going to be a big, big drop. Q very rarely tells us that something is big. Q uses a lot of booms, but Q is saying that something really big is coming. I tend to trust it. Power will return to the people. Well, if we get control of this Fed, that's going to be a big deal too. And I'll tell you what, if President Trump can pull it off, I would argue that's going to cement his legacy as president. You might as well just carve him another spot up there on Rushmore if he can pull it off, because it's something that past presidents were not able to do. And it's something that we the people can help with by where we choose to put our money. Because after all, this cabal, the very ones that we're fighting against, are the very ones that run the money. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Soros. We've talked all about this we've known this for a long, long time. This is our chance. This is our chance to take it all down. And our president needs our help. Next post, 1702. Q says, EU blinked, concessions made, zero tariffs, US and EU, America first. And they are talking about the meeting at the White House with President Trump and European Commissioner President Jean-Claude Juncker. Let's hear what they had to say.
Over the years, the United States has been losing hundreds of billions of dollars with the European Union, and we just want it to be a level playing field for our farmers, for our manufacturers, for everybody. And we also want a big beneficiary, frankly, to be the European Union. So we think it can be good for everybody, and that's what we're here to discuss.
We are close partners, allies, not enemies. We have to work together. We are representing half of the world trade. $1 trillion is the trade figure between us.
Yes.
And so I think that we have to talk each to another and not at another, and that's what we do today. I do think that we should focus on reducing tariffs, not on increasing them, and that's what we have to do. That's our job.
Well, I agree, and if we could have no tariffs and no barriers and no subsidies, the United States would be extremely pleased. We have many countries, we won't say European Union, we have many countries where they have massive barriers and they have massive tariffs, and we have to follow. And you could call it retaliation, but I'd rather just say that we want reciprocal.
Well, there you go. Q says EU blinked, concessions made, zero tariffs. Now, of course, that's what Trump would like, zero tariffs. Not sure if it's going to get down to zero or whatever, but at least we are in some serious talks. And this is going to be a big, big accomplishment, especially with the European Union, who really, really, look, a lot of these European countries are our allies. But at the end of the day, America first. And I would imagine if we can get the EU to fall in line, then of course Canada will also fall in line. Then we can really, really spend our attention where it's needed, which is on China. Those are the ones that are really, really killing us with tariffs. So this is a really big thing, and it should have been something. There were people that were clapping when before he even finished his sentence. He was speaking about this, and people were already clapping. Q says this is what happens when the POTUS does not sell out. After such an enormous announcement, what questions were shouted at POTUS? Now, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. The only audio that I could catch, it sounded like some people were kind of trying to ask about Michael Cohen and stuff. And of course, we all know that that's just a dog and pony show. And I'm not going to go, that's probably a story for another day. But yeah, they were talking about that. They were talking about Russia. Q says Russia delay in meeting Putin. Eyes open. MSM does not represent the people. The days of our leaders lining their pockets at the expense of the American taxpayer are over. Recent example, and here's a recent example off of Breitbart. Businesses tied to McCaskill's husband get $131 million in federal subsidies. Businesses with ties to Senator Claire McCaskill's Democrat of Missouri husband have received $131 million in federal government subsidies since McCaskill's election to the Senate in 2007, according to a report released Tuesday. The Kansas City Star reported that McCaskill's husband, Joseph Shepard, had personal income from investments in federally funded housing projects, receiving money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the U.S. Department of Agriculture that grew exponentially after McCaskill took office in 2007. In 2006, the year before McCaskill became a senator, McCaskill's husband reported making between $1,608 and $16,731 from these investments. In 2017, 5 years into McCaskill's second Senate term, Shepard reported earning between $365,000 and $1,118,000. My goodness, that's quite a jump. So it's working out well for Mr. Shepard. Now, there's no direct evidence that McCaskill is influencing her husband's investments. McCaskill does not sit on Senate committees that have oversight over USDA or HUD, but she has voted for spending bills that favor federal affordable housing programs. Shepard has invested in affordable housing projects since the 1970s and has seen these investments in those projects skyrocket over the years. The projects Shepard invested in got $62 million worth of federal money during McCaskill's first Senate term and $69 million in her second term. Well, there you go. As of 2017, Shepard serves as a limited partner, meaning he can only serve as an investor in 164 housing projects. Ms. McCaskill and Shepard have an estimated net worth ranging from $31 million to $37.5 million, and the Missouri Democrats' opponents have criticized her for her lavish spending habits. McCaskill faced harsh criticism in June when she admitted to using a private plane instead of traveling in a recreational vehicle. I wonder if you were traveling in one of these Dassault Falcons. I wonder. McCaskill is considered to be one of the most vulnerable Democratic senators up for re-election in 2018 since her state went for President Trump in the 2016 presidential election. The most recent Real Clear Politics average of polls places McCaskill with a 1% lead over her Republican opponent, Josh Hawley, which is within the margin of error. How about that? So, more Democrats coming out of the woodwork, taking some government subsidies. That's not good. And of course, everyone's crying Russia, 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 right? Meanwhile, Trump's taking care of tariffs like a boss. How about that? And Q says, go Kansas. And the Kansas, of course, is Mike Pompeo. And let's see how he's doing.
When you need to conduct your role, your appropriate role, I will provide you today. That is United States policy with respect to the issues you request. You asked me about U.S. policy with respect to sanctions. And I can confirm to you that no commitment has been made to change those policies in any way.
Did the president at this meeting call upon President Putin to withdraw from Crimea and eastern Ukraine?
Senator, I began my statement today with the United States government's policy.
I understand the declaration. I welcome it. I'm glad that it seems like we had to do a lot of effort to get there. But the question is, when he had a chance Did he confront Putin and say, we don't recognize your annexation of Crimea, we don't recognize your continuing hostilities in eastern Ukraine, and there's consequences for that?
Senator, the president was very clear with Vladimir Putin about U.S. positions. They're the U.S. positions that are the Trump administration's positions, and he spoke about them very firmly and clearly when he met with Vladimir Putin.
There you go, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he's testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They were grilling him in regards to North Korea and the denuclearization program. And Mike Pompeo, although, wasn't necessarily, I don't think he was necessarily dodging, but of course he wasn't super forthright, giving them a taste of their own medicine. And as you saw in that clip there, they were also grilling him in regards to the Helsinki summit, what was being discussed between these two world leaders, which is essentially kind of none of their business. Now, of course, they didn't seem so concerned years back ago when we had such a flexible president, and Mike Pompeo did remind them of that as well. But in that particular clip, they were talking about Trump's stance in regards to Crimea, the annexation of Crimea. And I have no idea where we're going to go with that. I don't know how tough Trump will be on Putin, if that was going to be some sort of negotiation piece at some point. But I'm not so sure how much the U.S. is going to be able to affect policy on that. But it's now a source of contention for the deep state because, after all, the guns thing didn't work. And then there was separating kids at the border. And then there was Kavanaugh. And now I guess it's Crimea. And Secretary of State says, why don't you go Crimea River about that? Because I'm not telling you anything. Next post, 1703, we get this Twitter link. And we've got Rod Rowe in brackets. And that link takes us to Mark Meadows' tweet, where he says, I just filed a resolution with Jim Jordan and several colleagues to impeach Rod Rosenstein. The DOJ has continued to hide information from Congress and repeatedly obstruct oversight, even defying multiple congressional subpoenas. We have had enough. Well, it sounds like tough talk, but we've been kind of hearing this about Rod Rowe for a while now, weeks, as a matter of fact. So it's very, very confusing, and the longer this drags on, the more it makes me wonder who is an actor in this whole game here. And Q alludes to this as well, too. We're reminded of this link here from July 25th. Where an Anon post this. This was post 66 on the Patriots Fight board, where it was in the middle of one of Q's posts, where it said, if Rod Rosenstein is dirty, Mueller must also be dirty. If Mueller is dirty, Rod Rosenstein must also be dirty. And Q confirms. So what do you think? I can't help but think they're both dirty in regards to Uranium One. And of course, Mueller was taking a lot of money in exchange for Uranium One. Now, if you remember, before all this began, the president and Mueller met privately. And of course, it wasn't going to be in regards to extending Mueller because that wasn't possible. So obviously, there was some reconciling that needed to be done. So is this whole thing dragging on so that we can eventually turn our way to the real collusion? If Rod Rosenstein and Mueller are both dirty, are they dragging this along so that eventually we can steer it that way? Do you think impeachment is actually going to happen, or are we going to see everything come that we're asking for? All these unredacted memos, texts, everything, all of it. Are we going to get the Whopper with cheese, or is Rod Rowe going to continue to just let himself get impeached at this point? Because that's what Mark Meadows is saying, that we've had enough. So it looks like we're going to get some resolution at some point. But to be honest with you, we've been talking about firing Rod Rowe for a while. So I can't help but think that this is going to take another crazy steer. Let me know down below. Rod Rowe and Mueller, if they're dirty, they're both dirty. If they're clean, does that mean they're both clean? I tend to think they're both a little bit dirty. And this is probably, this whole thing is playing out in order to make good for some of their misdeeds so that they can go after some of the real colluders, which were, of course, all the way from Obama to Hillary Clinton. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let me know in the comments below. Q says here in post 1705, you'll soon know why. So it looks like we're going to find out exactly how much dirt we've got on these guys. Next post, 1706. Oh, we've got No Name. And he's like, no thanks. Not me. No Name returning to headlines. Q, well, how about that? Yeah, I thought he was real sick. I thought he had some brain cancer or whatever. It sounds like he's going to make his way back into headlines, huh? Post 1707. Anon says no name in the redacted portion of FISA application. Q says, when did no name travel to the UK? Q. Well, this is interesting because technically I don't honestly remember. Now, this was posted from an Bibliophobia, and this is a great post here. He says, interesting. Apparently he went to Georgia 1st of January 2017. So he was in Europe at the same time as his aide. And his aide was out there drumming up all that information from Fusion GPS regarding the Steele dossier. And his trip to Montenegro was canceled. I wonder why. Interesting. U.S. Senator John McCain has visited Krivaletti, an area on the administrative boundary line with the breakaway Georgian territory of Southern Ossetia that has been controlled by Russian forces since a brief war was fought in 2008. McCain posed for journalists as he shook hands with a local man standing in Russia-controlled South Ossetia, which is separated by barbed wire. U.S. Senator John McCain, Republican Arizona, arrived in Georgia on January 1st, together with Senate colleagues Lindsey Graham and Amy Klobuchar. The trio visited the Baltic states and Ukraine before Georgia and have canceled a stop in Montenegro. And then he said, this is his theory. No name got word of the dossier mid-trip, Georgia and Montenegro, and thought he would like to LARP as James Bond. Newspaper on a bench spy BS. He didn't send an aide. He went to Britain himself and picked up the dossier, flew home with a crotchety little hard-on for what he thought would take Trump down. Interesting theory. I'm not so sure I agree with it, but that's an interesting point. Edit. Okay, it's getting stranger. I'm falling down a rabbit hole here. By December 2016, the completed document had made its way to Senator John McCain, who turned it over to FBI Director James Comey on December 9th. And here we have a link to the Moscow Project. McCain delivers dossier to Comey. Let's go back here. Early in August 2016, FBI agents in Rome reportedly received a copy of Steele's first two reports. The dossier's existence was first reported more than 2 months later on October 31st, when David Korn of Mother Jones wrote that a former senior intelligence officer for a Western country who specialized in Russian counterintelligence provided the Bureau with memos based on his recent interactions with Russian sources, contending the Russian government has for years tried to co-opt and assist Trump, and that the FBI requested more information from him. So December 8th is when his aide got the dossier. Here's McCain on Face the Nation 3 days later. Okay, so right around December there. Interesting. So not sure what I think about that, but other than that, I couldn't really find any trips to the UK by No Name himself. Now Q goes on to say in post 1708, what if the UK government worked hand in hand with the Hussein administration to sabotage the 2016 election? Well, it's looking more and more like that's the case, isn't it? Data collection, voice, video, bugging, creation of fake intel dossier using X-Spies. Remember, they were all circumventing, the Five Eyes. And maybe we're finding out that some of that was going through New Zealand. Maybe that's where some of this data collection was what was happening. But it sounds like, once again, we're talking about data. Creation of fake intel dossier using X-Spy. Christopher Steele, co-sponsor insurance policy regarding POTUS election. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, No Name, Clapper, Brennan, Rice, Loretta Lynch, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Bill Clinton, Hussein, and 22 others. What if intel mass penetrations to frame Russia? CrowdStrike, servers, Seth Rich, Julian Assange. Why does the UK government desperately want Julian Assange? Think source files, the more you know. Well, the UK would desperately want Julian Assange because Julian Assange, if he gives it all away, he's going to let everybody know that the UK was involved. Like Hugh just said right here, it's going to show that the UK government worked hand in hand with the Hussein administration to sabotage the 2016 election. All right? Servers. Q told us before that either way, Julian Assange or the server, that's what's going to bring the house down. Right? Seth Rich was how he got the information. It wasn't a hack. And CrowdStrike was the one that claimed the hack. What if intel masked penetrations to frame Russia? Yeah, all this intel being from top to bottom amongst all these people right here. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, obviously biased. No Name, looks like he did end up in Europe. He was, either way, he was part of assembling this Steele dossier. Clapper and Brennan, they were the leakers. Rice, Loretta Lynch, she had a lot to gain, didn't she? And of course, Hillary Rodham Clinton orchestrating everything, as well as Bill Clinton. So it looks like a lot of damaging information. And we already know this, that whether it's the server or Julian Assange, it's going to bring the whole house of cards down. And while everyone's crying Russia, 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 it looks like the UK was the one that was selling us out in the first place. How about that? Q says, think, source, files. Well, that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this, right? Is being able to find these source files. So, does Julian Assange still have those files? Were they already coughed up? We know that CrowdStrike couldn't have been hacked, not that fast. It was most likely simply a leaker. And that would have been our Seth Rich. And we definitely want to find out what happened to him. Let's move on. Post 1709. Facebook death spiral. Stock plunges 24%. And Q says something big is about to drop. And I would say that is pretty big. 24%. Looks like they lost 20% in under 2 hours. Mark Zuckerberg loses $150 billion. My goodness, that is absolutely massive. Let me take you over here to CNBC. Tech stocks set to fall Thursday with Facebook on track for biggest drop ever. The tech-heavy NASDAQ was set for a big down day Thursday after disappointing quarterly results from Facebook sent the social media giant hurtling towards its biggest share price decline ever and on track to lose more than $100 billion in market value. The Invesco QQQ Trust, which tracks the NASDAQ 100 index and can give traders a good idea of how the NASDAQ stocks will trade, was down more than 2% at one point in after-hours trading Wednesday. At last count, the ETF was off by about 1.5%. Facebook lost more than a fifth of its value after hours. NASDAQ futures opened lower Wednesday evening, off by about 0.8%. By 5:30 a.m. ET Thursday, they indicated losses of 114.59 points at the open. Big technology stocks other than Facebook felt the collateral damage as investors fled the sector. Apple lost nearly 1%. Facebook's FANG brethren were also lower. Amazon, which reports after the bell Thursday, lost 2.3%. Netflix, which disappointed FANG investors with its own set of weak results earlier this earnings season, shed about 3% in after hours. Google parent Alphabet fell 2.4%. Facebook competitors Twitter and Snap both lost 4% after hours Wednesday. Investors did not see this coming. The NASDAQ Composite Index hit a record during Wednesday trading as investors crowded back into the FANG names once again. Facebook was responsible for a lot of that boost, jumping 1% during regular trading. But after the bell, it was a different story. Facebook posted weaker than expected daily active users for last quarter and said revenue growth would decline sequentially in the second half of this year. Well, it sounds like what we've heard from Q before. Q told us that some of these social media companies were going to collapse under the weight of their own illegal activities. And in the previous post, we were just talking about data collection, CrowdStrike, things like this, Google, Facebook. And we know Facebook is basically just an extension of the Pentagon's lifelong project. So it's interesting that we have President Trump taking over the Fed, and we see this massive drop in not just Facebook, but social media, but particularly Facebook, who was a massive offender. But like I said, back in post 896 there, Q said 100% regulated. Some platforms will collapse under own weight of illegal activities. Well, it looks like Mark Zuckerberg is having his day. Finally, post 1710, we get this post from back in June 12th. Just a reply to Q from last thread about Ingraham interview. It was an awful interview. Once again, weak, ineffectual, limp-wristed. This was talking about Rosenstein. Until Rosenstein is hauled off by House Sergeant at Arms as granted per the Supreme Court, it means nothing. Anyone remember Holder? Nothing happened to him. Nothing. This pisses me off to no end. Just close the fists and crush them already. What the hell is Trump waiting for? Q said, full weight of the House versus ARM. Why are optics important? How does DC work? Why is Ryan still in office? Lame duck. Why is Ryan leaving office? Who controls Ryan? Autists engage? Q. Well, yeah, if you remember, Paul Ryan had quite a few ambitions, and then all of a sudden he was leaving office. And ever since then, he's been kind of working well with the president, or at least the best that he can. Q says relevant today, news unlocked. So I have a feeling that with this Mark Meadows tweet talking about the motion here to impeach Rod Rosenstein, I can't help but feel if Q is reminding us of this June 12th post, that I would imagine they are going to be calling for Ryan, who controls the House. He's going to probably have to bring this to the House floor for a vote, and I imagine then I can't help but hope that this is going to be the moment for Rosenstein. Rod Rowe has got to go at some point, right? So we'll see what happens. This just popped out, and I haven't seen any relevant news relating to Paul Ryan just yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if later today we find something out. But it sounds like they could be compelling him to put this to a House vote, and we could be seeing Rod Rowe out the dough. There you go. Those are your Q posts for today. I would have loved to have deep dived on a lot more of these, but boy, these were a lot of posts here. So that's what I got for you so far. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me get the message out. I really appreciate it. And of course, if Q posts again, I will be right up on it as soon as humanly possible. Okay, this is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay sane.